there's several tools that we need available to us. The first one you mentioned, which is the recognition that collusion is not uncommon, and therefore the simple fact of wondering whether it has taken place is not evidence of a mental defect. So collusion is natural. But the second thing to realize is that when collusion happens, it automatically comes with an attempt to disguise itself. And therefore, the normal tools that we would use to detect what the nature of some pattern we are looking at is and what its cause might be, those tools are often not functional because those who have colluded will have organized evidence so that we will reach a wrong conclusion and fail to see their role. So, in effect, Occam's razor, although it would work if we had all of the information, is gamed by those who would collude. But I would argue that actually the most important tool at our disposal is simply the scientific method and the recognition that the term conspiracy theory itself is a weapon used to dismiss those who wonder about the explanations for certain events. And there is no reason that we should be using conspiracy theory because the word theory means a hypothesis that has withstood test. It is not the notion that something may have taken place. The notion that something may have taken place, if it is testable, is a hypothesis inherently. And so what I do is I use the term conspiracy hypothesis. And what that means when I say conspiracy hypothesis rather than conspiracy theory, what I'm intending to imply is that the toolkit that one uses to evaluate these different explanations is well understood to us. There are shelves in your college libraries dedicated to the philosophy of science, and that is to say, the rules of engagement for evaluating competing hypotheses. To put something in this modality, to describe something as a conspiracy hypothesis, is to invoke the standards by which it is to be properly judged, and it is also to say that the fact that one considers a given explanation does not rule out the consideration of others. A person can simultaneously entertain multiple hypotheses. In fact, that is what science invites us to do. So I would suggest that all who are interested in looking at explanations for events, some of which are straightforward and some of which may be nefarious, you should sign up for the scientific toolkit, and that means that you are obligated to its standards rather than leaping to the last page and assuming that you've diagnosed the problem and falsely granting the notion the label theory.
So far, so good. I understand exactly what you're saying and its importance, but then you and I both run into a snag. The reality is that a lot of what is now happening is quite profoundly anti-reason, anti-science, even scornful of Enlightenment values. I recently talked to Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay about their book, Cynical Theory, and they highlight the fact that postmodernism rejected not all of the great theological worldviews, the great political worldviews, including, funnily enough, the very Marxism, the cultural version of which I think probably largely drove postmodernism, but also the Enlightenment, science, reason, and modern thinking. And then critical theory's picked up, if you like, and taken an amazing hold despite its real emptiness at its heart on campuses right across the West. And my impression is that it's particularly strong on a lot of American campuses. So you've actually got people who say, no, science won't provide the answers, don't go to science. How did we get to that
Well,
point?
you certainly do.
There's a conspiracy there, I'm sure.
Yes and no. There may be collusion, but I think there's a simpler explanation that is at the core, which is we unfortunately, and this might be another American defect, we embraced the idea that market forces were the right way to administer science. And those market forces in fact, upset the delicate balance. They disrupt science. And so much of what we call science now is really the product of science departments. It's the product of people with scientific degrees, but it does not follow the scientific method, and it should not carry the same power in our minds. So if you want to dethrone the postmodern movement and all of its outgrowths, which we should, because it is simply about power and it does not have the ability to navigate difficult problems of the kind we face. But if you want to dethrone it, the way to do that is to make science robust and to insulate it from market forces so that scientists can tell us what we need to know rather than what we want to hear.
I understand that, and that's a very useful set of insights. Can I just pose to you the question that we need more than just information, though, and reason to guide us? We actually need hope. We need philosophical underpinnings that make us believe that it's worth getting out of bed, that we ought to be doing the right thing by our community. We ought to be honest about ourselves and striving to be our best. In a struggle for power, those things seem to be jettisoned. So can I ask you, as we draw this to a close then, you've given us an idea of what we can take out of good science, properly applied reason, if you like. Where, in your view, can I ask you, is your perspective on what we might believe about ourselves if we're to find a sense of hope and a sense of unity for young people in an age when, as Jonathan Haidt puts it, we're raising our children to believe that life is actually a battle between good people and bad people. We're drawing the dividing line between good and bad in the wrong places all the time, and identity politics is both a product of that and an accelerant of it.
I would argue that science is necessary, but not sufficient. That in effect, we are looking at moral obligations which cannot be derived strictly from scientific conclusions. So we, of course, are in a serious pickle if what the scientific establishment delivers us is something that isn't factually based. But even in the case that we have a factually based explanation for things, we need to go further. And you're right, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of philosophy. But I would also point out that because of the vulnerability of a overly market-focused scientific process, the niche is open for those who are seeking power to exploit effectively a narrative gap, that what we could understand about ourselves and what I think we would realize if we had a more robust understanding of who we are, how we got here, what its implications are for modern life, the absence of that robust story is leaving people to paint pictures which place them at advantage. And the truth is, we are incredibly lucky to be here. We are incredibly lucky not only to have the ability to wield power in our collective interest, but we have minds that allow us to understand meaning, to recognize each other's humanity as similarly important to our own. And we are therefore capable of fantastic feats of compassion and insight, and we are capable of recognizing the sobering responsibility of not wrecking the place and thereby denying it to future generations of people. So I want scientists at the table. I also want artists and philosophers and humanitarians present so that we can recognize what a marvelous and awesome responsibility we have, and we can live up to it.
Thank you for watching this episode. We appreciate your support. If you value vital conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel there and also click the notification bell to stay up to date with new releases.